I just waited for that little notification to pop up. All right, kia ora, no tamaki makoto aho, he tangata tiriti aho, ko Scott Pilkington aho. Hello, my name is Scott Pilkington. I live in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You'll have to bear with us a teeny bit here. We're currently in our 4th week of level 4 lockdown, so we're struggling at home a wee bit. I can't promise that my cat won't walk through the middle of the screen. She is more opinionated than I am. So by day, I'm an educational bureaucrat, and by night, among other things, I'm an honorary fellow in museums and cultural heritage at University of Auckland and a recent fellow of the Society, both of which became possible in one part or another through the research that I'm talking about today. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly also acknowledge the tangata whenua, the people on whose land I live, particularly my local iwis of Ngāti Whātua o Aurake, Ngāti Poa, and Waikato Tainui, and all the people who went before me and on whose shoulders I get to stand. And I'll talk a little bit about some of them during this presentation. So this research began in 2018 when it was announced that Auckland University of Technology, or AUT, would join the other 7 universities in Aotearoa in offering a higher doctorate qualification. As part of this process, it became apparent that this new academic dress would need to be created. So this provided a prompt to examine what academic dress already exists for existing AUT doctorates, so that the new qualifications could be sympathetic to the existing ones, but also what the relationship is between different doctoral academic dress at the other universities, so that the design of the new dress wasn't reinventing the wheel. Throughout my presentation, I'm going to be dotting in pictures of New Zealand academic dress, along with descriptions of what it is. The pictures here on the screen right now is my little sister graduating a BCom from Victoria University of Wellington in 2017, and my most recent graduation in June, where I got my MA. So, like many other former colony countries, Aotearoa has an inherited tradition of academic dress at its 8 universities, and scores of polytechnics and wānanga throughout the country have now also adopted academic dress. For the sake of scope and simplicity, this research only focuses on the universities, and the rest will be a future research project. As noted by Noel Cox, FBS, who I can see is in the audience tonight, so no pressure, New Zealand was developing its first cities during the peak of the 19th century and inherited a sense of provincial civic pride and its desire for popular education from its Scottish migrants, which led to the introduction of New Zealand's first universities. The first university in Aotearoa was the University of Otago, founded in 1869 in the city of Dunedin, which is New Zealand's Scottish capital. It was absorbed into the University of New Zealand, which was then founded a year later. The first set of regulations for this university date to 1874, but the first mention of requirements for academic dress come in the 1884 calendar, by which point 3 university colleges had been established. The Federal University oversaw all of the examinations, with the end-of-year exam scripts being sent to external markers in London, leaving the teaching up to the affiliated colleges. By the early 1920s, this was made up of 4 university colleges and 2 agricultural colleges. And you can sort of see them there on the screen. The little faint green box marks out the scope of the University of New Zealand, running 1870 to about 1963. So 6 of these 8 universities that exist now share a tradition of academic dress that date back to their foundation. By the year 2000, there were now 8 universities in Aotearoa, and an entire culture of academic dress had been established. Although a separate institution by the 1920s, Lincoln Agricultural College, and then later Lincoln University, only developed its own academic dress regulations after 1990, Massey Agricultural College, and then later called Massey University, only developed its own academic dress regulations after about 1965, when it formally split from Victoria University of Wellington. AUT began as a technical school in 1895 and went through a range of names and organizations until becoming a university in the year 2000. Although AUT offered bachelor's degrees from 1993, the first academic dress regulations date to 1999. For the most part, the universities have extremely similar styles of dress, and varyingly use similar embellishments and colors to denote subjects, academic level, and or position. So to understand the adoption, the adoption, development, and design of academic dress in Aotearoa, 3 main publications needed to be consulted: Smith, Haycraft, and Cox. And for the description and study of academic dress, 2 main publications were indispensable: Shaw and Groves. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what I read in those, partly because you're all familiar already, and 2, we've only got 20 minutes. So to continue on looking at the context, in New Zealand, we've got 4 different kinds of doctorates. We have named and professional doctorates. I've got some examples listed there. The Doctor of Philosophy, which all of our universities now call a PhD. For a while there, Waikato called theirs the DPhil. We've got higher degrees, which can either be awarded by examination or as an honorary degree. And so this is your Doctor of Literature, Doctor of Science, etc. And then finally, true honorary doctorates, which are often just an OND. And we've got there as an example a Waikato Doctor of Musical Arts, which I took at a wedding of my local church organist. So of course, you've got to have the cathedral organist perform if you're an organist. So going into this research, I had 4 main assumptions. The first was that academic dress would be similar between institutions, featuring either a similar design or a similar color. So as an example, a Bachelor of Design at one university is going to look similar to a Bachelor of Design at another university. My second assumption is that each university will maintain a codified relationship in the scheme of academic dress across the range of qualifications offered. So within this example, say a BA and an LLB will be the same design, but different colors, and then the same would be for at the master's and doctoral level. Each university will maintain a codified relationship in the scheme of academic dress across the range of qualifications offered. And the example here is Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, Doctor of Science will all have the same color, but will have different designs. And then the final assumption was that there'll be an evolution of style and design through the different qualification levels. So example here being that a bachelor's degree will be the simplest, and then a doctoral degree will be the most complex. And then I built a range of hypotheses around this, and questioning, well, is this true? What does this mean? And were my assumptions correct? So my methodology was to look at primary source material. I used university calendars and official policy statutes to have a look at what changes happened and when they happened. And so I looked through 255 of these across the 9 universities. And I've listed here a quick summary of all of the universities, which of New Zealand's main islands they're on, the years active, and the year that they became an independent university. And finally, how many different doctorates they award. So to answer my first assumption, yes and no. Is there any kind of similarity across the country? As I've mentioned, many of the universities mostly use the same same style of gown and hood, and there is some similarity in the colors used. The University of Waikato is unusual in that all of its qualifications use the same color. There's no subject specification, but so they're sort of largely excluded because it's sort of quite hard to compare them to anyone else. So the 6 universities that were originally part of the University of New Zealand kept many of the same colors, particularly in areas where that subject was taught prior to 1961. And there's a list here on the screen. However, even among these universities, subjects developed after 1961 are not similar in color. In a seminal journal article on New Zealand academic dress, Noel Cox lamented that only 2 universities in Aotearoa teach theology, and they aren't even the same color. At Auckland, it's forest green, but at Otago, it's kingfisher blue. And not only does it occur that the same subject at different universities is different colors, but the same color at different universities means different things. So at AUT, yellow represents engineering, but at Massey, it stands for business administration, and pharmacy at the University of Otago. On the screen here, medicine is listed in square brackets there because the subject color did eventually change. Medicine is only taught at Otago and Auckland and was developed at Auckland after 1961. Otago eventually gave the color mauve to health science when that was developed in the late 90s, and then took lilac for medicine. Auckland took crimson and uses a Medici crimson shade, which always appears to me as fuchsia. So over the last 150 years, the 8 universities in Aotearoa have been slowly moving away from each other. Some have had drastic changes, such as when the University of Canterbury adopted a new colour scheme and style for some of its qualifications in 1965, while others have drifted more slowly. So one way of analysing the change is through theme mapping. This involves looking for similarities, looking back through time and finding the last common ancestor. For example, at AUT in the early 2000s, there was a school that contained your traditional art subjects, creative writing, multi-studies, and design studies. 2 decades later, these are all different schools, but they still have the same hood color. Another way is through subject proliferation and university specification. This involves looking at how changes to academic dress follow internal rules and developed slowly over time. The most obvious example of this is at the University of Auckland, where almost no 2 hoods are the same. Hoods are coloured by their home discipline. So for example, all subjects taught by the Faculty of Arts are rose pink, with coloured bands and stripes to signify the degree in question. In the pictures on the screen taken here at the University of Auckland September 2020 graduation, the woman on the bottom there is wearing a dark violet hood with a dark brown band on the edge of the satin. This indicates the degree was the Master of Disaster Management. In the top picture, we can see 4 degree colours. The scarlet and yellow on your left is for the PhD, the white on white in the middle is the Doctor of Musical Arts. It could have also been the Doctor of Music, but I did check who this particular chap was. The gold on gold there is the Doctor of Fine Arts, and on the far right, you can just see the lilac for the Bachelor of Health Science. Now, somewhere between the 2 examples I've just given of Auckland and AUT, where is Victoria University of Wellington, where traditional subjects have their own colours. So for example, pink for arts, blue for law, orange for commerce, but new subjects, in quotation marks there, don't. So they even went further as to change the new subjects in the PhD from a traditional hood to a stole scarf hybrid. I can never say that. So Victoria has done away with hoods for some of their master's degrees and for the PhD. Here on the screen, I've got some examples of master's graduates in their blue and white and fuchsia and green stoles and trenches, and the 2 PhDs in their post office red stole with the John Knox bonnet. And here we can see the comparison between Faculty of Arts at the University of Auckland and the faculty that was called Arts at AUT and eventually became called the Faculty of Culture and Society. As you can see that a lot of their degrees started red, and it's only and the ones that are underlined broke away and moved in with engineering, computer science, and maths and astronomy to form the Faculty of Design and Creative Technologies. And I've just listed there the Master of Communication Studies with square brackets because it used to be red and it changed to gold. And you can see at the University of Auckland, rose pink is the standard colour the whole way through. The 2 exceptions there being Master of Heritage Conservation, which is co-taught with architecture, which is why it's got lemon there, and Master of Theology, because originally theology was its faculty on its own and it merged with the Faculty of Arts in 2009. So revisiting my assumptions and hypotheses. First one, that academic dress at a doctoral level would carry similarities between institutions across the country. Yes, for the most part, the universities use the same base design generally. The Cambridge MA gown and hood and bonnets for caps are either a John Knox bonnet or a Tudor bonnet. And we can see here an example of an AUT doctor who graduated, did he graduate? In July, I think. And he's got his Tudor bonnet tucked under his arm there. A second assumption was that each university will maintain a codified relationship in its schemes. And the answer here is, once again, yes, for the most part. There are some variations for individual bachelor's degrees, and those appear to be the result of degrees inherited when universities and educational colleges emerged in the early 2000s. But for the most part, there is a clear differentiation between bachelor's, master's, and doctoral academic dress. And all of these can be easily picked up from a moderate distance. This is a bit more complicated at Victoria by the use of that stole. Third assumption was each university will maintain a codified relationship in the scheme of academic dress. Absolutely. At no university did the base design change as you progress through related degrees. The only time a change like this occurred was in subjects like psychology that are offered in multiple faculties for first and second degrees. So for example, at most universities, you could do a BA or a BSc or a Bachelor of Health Science in psychology, and then same at the master's level. But at a doctorate level, they're only administratively processed by one faculty. So for example, the Doctor of Clinical Sciences at Auckland is in science, so it's blue. Doctor of Clinical Psychology. At Auckland is in science, so it's blue, but at Massey it's in arts, so it's pink. So and the last assumption was that there will be an evolution of style and design through the different qualification levels. And yes, absolutely, at no university was this different. For the most part, bachelor's degrees were Cambridge BA gowns with a matching hood lined with a subject colour, trimmed with white fur or satin, and master's degrees were Cambridge MA gowns with a matching hood lined with a subject colour and not trimmed with white fur or satin. And doctoral degrees were Cambridge MA gowns with facings and a subject colour or the university colour. So for example, this AUT PhD has got post office red facings. And then the hoods are lined with the subject color or the philosophy color. And this remains consistent with the conclusions drawn by Smith and assisted by Sherd in 1970. So this research presented so far formed the basis for my FBS dissertation. And one of the critiques of this research at the time was that it didn't involve searching through archives for the university committee minutes to see if any discussions had been recorded regarding the development of this dress. And I'll touch on that in a little bit. And I'm going to take a quick moment here, to take a breath and a sip of water, but also to reflect on doctoral degrees that no longer exist. And we have the lovely example of the Otago Bachelor of Surveying. So AUT developing the 2 new higher doctorates gave an opportunity for new academic dress to be designed. And I thought on the basis of my FBS dissertation that I would take a stab at it, being the person I knew who knew the most about the topic. In the end, the university decided to adopt a Doctor of Science and a Doctor of Literature. My challenges were in making something in keeping with the current design that also suited designs from other universities, and of course without upstaging the Chancellor or Vice Chancellor. My final design took a gown with the same cut as the VC's gown, but removed most of the lace and coloured it in the doctoral shade of post office red instead of using gold and silver. Now, unfortunately, at AUT, the colour for arts and literature is also post office red, while thankfully the colour for science is cornflower blue. So to differentiate my design from the doctoral dress at other universities, some of whom use a red on red design for their PhD, I opted to add a damask silk facing to the gown design. When I last presented on these designs, they'd been recently accepted by the AUT VC, and I've been now told that they'll be adopted subject to some modifications, and I can go into those later if people would like. But all of this also raised a couple of other questions. One, is the future of academic dress in Aotearoa? Should we keep patching up this medieval relic, or should we design something from scratch that reflects who we are as a people, who we are as a nation, and something for the 21st century? We live in a modern world at the bottom of the Pacific, a long way away from where these traditions originated. If we accept that universities and other institutions must continue with pomp and circumstance and dressing up in fancy dress to conduct formal events, perhaps we can play with how we do them. The image here comes from a display on academic dress put together by a professor of science communication from University of Otago as part of an exhibition at Otago Museum celebrating the university's 150th birthday in 2019. And it was very frustrating because they had colored lighting and you had to try and play guess the hood, and I couldn't get any of them right because with the colored lighting, you can't recognize the satin correctly. Very frustrating. So one of the big things that's been happening worldwide in the future of academic dress is through adopting Indigenous designs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 4 images that I've got here. I'm going to work right to left. So on the right, we have Wiremu demonstrating the academic dress of the Kaikorero for AUT.
You want toast?
I believe that this is, I think,
well, you
from
have
the
to
procession,
wait a little bit
a
because I'm
2018 procession.
Just a minute.
And it features the Potama design, which you can just see down the front of his facings there. In 2013, Massey redesigned the academic dress for the Chancellor, Pro-Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, and University Registrar, featuring robes with a woven Potama and whakarere patterns made from locally sourced superfine merino soaked in powdered pounamu, which I think overseas is called jade. And that represents Massey's origin as an agricultural college, Massey's commitment to biculturalism, and respecting tradition while also pointing to the future. In the third picture, we have 2 wonderful graduates graduating their respectively MA and BA, and they're wearing their ta'ovala Tongan mats and kahoa lei my friend David being on the left there. And in the last picture, we have an unknown Māori graduate wearing her kakahu, or Māori cloak. And in this case, this isn't a korowai, but is often confused for one. And it's a whole debate in New Zealand. And of course, the thing that we need to think about is that change can happen very quickly. With the adoption of COVID-19 measures, we've seen a lot of things like this, and apologies for the lack of pixels, where graduates are matching their face masks, and at the time this picture was taken, that was optional, to match to their academic dress. Ooh, I'm starting to run out of time, but I'll quickly blast through my second to last slide. There's just a couple of things there are a couple of things in the works for the future. The work of my FBS dissertation has been submitted for the 2021 TBS issue, so you get to read about this in greater detail once that's gone through its processes. Through collecting data from the 255 calendars and statutes, I also built up a lot of information about the academic dress of university officials. Like this next research is definitely going to build on the work of Noel Cox, Smith, Sherd, and Haycroft, but it's also going to involve hunting through university archives and records. Between lockdowns, I've managed to visit one archive so far. There we go. And an exploratory study of this first one is coming out in the next issue of the TBS. I've given you a preview here with the permission of the editor. I next need to work my way around the other universities in case they have any records in the archives. Several have stated that they think they don't, but I need to go through and check. And that has to wait till we come out of lockdown. Once I've completed this, I intend to undertake a social science investigation into how graduates associate with their academic dress or how they don't, and how they modify it to suit their needs. And the last little thing, it's been suggested that Burgon fellows and members who reside in Aotearoa should form a local informal chapter. Noel started that off, and I think I have the contact details of all of the fellows. But if you're a member in Aotearoa and would like to and would be interested in joining this, get in touch. If you send a message to the society, they'll pass it on to me. And this brings my discussion for you today to an end. Tēnā koutou katoa, kia pai te rā. And I finish here with a lovely picture straight after my last graduation ceremony with a woman who inspires me greatly, a former colleague of mine who now has a PhD from UBC and is a lecturer in sociology. Thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to any questions that you might have.